It says we are on live. I think we're on actually.
No, she has to come up. You can send a message, say we're in the new link now. That was sent by Domino. Okay, it looks like she's coming on now. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
Hare Krishna. I can hear you. Can you hear us?
You're live now.
Okay. We can't see anyone. Is that normal? You can let me know when to begin.
And you can go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Thank you. I don't know what happened with this. We're grateful that you invited Vraja, Lila, and myself, Ekavira Das, and it's a very special day for us. It's the Tir Bhava disappearance day of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So we do this class in his honor. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Govinda Vallabha Govinda Vallabha Sharanjana Rajaranjana Jamunatira Nalacha Jamunatira Nalacha Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Kunjabi Hari Gopi Janavallabha Gopi Janavallabha Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Rama Shama Sundara, Shama Sundara, Rama Shama Sundara, Shama Sundara, Krishna Balaram Jaya, 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 Jaya Radha Damodara, Radha Damodara, Giri Govardhan Jaya, Giri Govardhan Jaya Vishnu Shimad AC Bhaktivinoda Swami Prabhupada Jaya Vishnu Shimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ananta Koti Vaishnava Namacharya Shri Let's go Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopakunda Shyamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Mathura Dham Ki Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Shri Ganga Maya Ki Jamuna Maya Ki Tulasi Devi Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Samaveda Bhakti Vrindavan Ki Shri Shri Radha Shyamasundar Ki Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Shri Nitai Gaur Nitai Ki Radha Damodar Ki Shri Bhakti Tirtha Swami Tirabam Mahotsava Ki Nitai Gaur Premanand
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 7, text number 8. Text 8. Narayanam namaskrityam naranchayvam narotamam devam saraswati vyasam tato jayam muhurdayat nasta prasho bhadreshu nityam bhagavati sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. So text 8 Sasamhitam Bhagavatim Vidvanukramya Chatmajam Shukam Adyapayan Asha Nivriti Niratammunihi Shaha, that Samhitam, Vedic literature, Bhagavatim, in relation with the personality of Godhead, Kritva, having done, Anukramya, by correction and repetition, Cha, and Atmajam, his own son, Shukam, Sukadev Goswami, Adyapayam, Payam, Asha, taught, Nivriti, path of self-realization, Niratam, engage, Munihi, the sage. Srila Prabhupada's translation and purport. The great sage Vyasadeva, after compiling the Srimad Bhagavatam and revising it, taught it to his own son, Sri Shukadev Goswami, who was already engaged in self-realization. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural commentation on the Brahma Sutras compiled by the same author. This Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra is meant for those who are already engaged in self-realization. Srimad Bhagavatam is so made that one becomes at once engaged in the path of self-realization simply by hearing the topics. Although it is especially meant for Paramahamsas or those who are totally engaged in self-realization, it works into the depths of the hearts of those who may be worldly men. Worldly men are all engaged in sense gratification, but even such men will find in this Vedic literature a remedial measure for their material diseases. Shukadev Goswami was a liberated soul from the very beginning of his birth, and his father taught him Srimad Bhagavatam. Amongst mundane scholars, there is some diversity of opinion as to the date of compilation of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is, however, certain from the text of the Bhagavatam that it was compiled before the disappearance of King Parikshit and after the departure of Lord Krishna. When Maharaj Parikshit was ruling the world as the king of Bharatvarsha, he chastised the personality of Godhead according to revealed scriptures and astrological calculation. The age of Kali is in its 5,000th year. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam was compiled not less than 5,000 years ago. Mahabharata was compiled before Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Puranas was compiled before Mahabharata. That is an estimation of the date of compilation of different Vedic literatures. The synopsis of Srimad Bhagavatam was given before the detailed description under instruction of Narada. Srimad Bhagavatam is the science for following the path of Nivritti Marg. The path of Pravritti Marg was condemned by Narada. That path is the natural inclination for all conditioned souls. The theme of Srimad Bhagavatam is the cure of the materialistic disease of the human being, or stopping completely the pangs of material existence. Om Ganati Mirandasya Gana Gana Shalakaya Yakshur Minatam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarabhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Visamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Vasadi Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Panchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripasindhubhya cha, Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So thank you very much, devotees, for inviting us to be on your class, morning class in Alatra. This is for us. We're very grateful, and so many beautiful and wonderful devotees in the Alatra community, and we thank all of you, and we thank Ekadashi Devi. Today, of course, is the holy, auspicious disappearance day of our spiritual master, His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Maharaj. And so I'm guessing that's one of the reasons that we were invited to give the class today. So we're thankful. Thank you so much. So I was just thinking the pause that we had to get on the class, that was interesting. We had been here connecting to get on this class since 20 minutes before 8 o'clock. And then interestingly enough, when the time came for us to get on the class, something happened, some snag happened, something happened. And so it took, some time for us to be able to connect, right? So I was thinking about that in relationship to this verse, and Srila Vyasadeva, as we know, how he came to a place where there was like a standstill. He understood that he hadn't quite given everything that he could have given in terms of the Vedic knowledge. He hadn't quite glorified the Supreme Lord. So there was a pause. And then Narada Muni came to him, right? And Narada Muni then had this conversation with him about why he was feeling the despondency that he was experiencing. And of course, we learn that this despondency he was feeling was because he had not properly glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And ultimately, that is the goal of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Srimad Bhagavatam is to be able to glorify the personality of Godhead and to be able to connect us with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Vedas, as we know, deals with many subjects. And there are the books that are given in the Vedas are highly developed, and they cover all different departments of knowledge. And of course, Bhagavatam is known as the Bhagavad Purana. And so we know that Bhagavatam deals exclusively with the subjects of the Lord. So this Srimad Bhagavatam, opulent, this is very beautiful. It actually means related to God. So Bhagavatam could be translated as the beautiful story of Krishna, beautiful story of God. And Bhagavatam describes our relationship with him and the process for realizing that relationship. So it's important to understand why we study Srimad Bhagavatam. Alatra is such a community that we think we're like kind of talking to the choir, because there's so many very senior, exalted devotees that have been reading Srimad Bhagavatam for many, 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 many years and have realized Srimad Bhagavatam in many ways, I'm sure. So in the 18,000 verses of Bhagavatam, there's detailed accounts, of course, of Krishna's name, his form, his nature, his personality, the devotees, the residents, his residence, his activities, and so much more. And so in this first canto, and in the first chapter, Vyasadeva is Srila Prabhupada actually explains about the Srimad Bhagavatam. He speaks about Bhagavatam and he says, completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, the Srimad Bhagavatam propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. And so we see that in the purport, where Prabhupada is explaining that that this Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, is so made that one becomes at once engaged in a path of self-realization by hearing the topics. And then he goes on to say, although it is especially meant for Paramahamsas, or those who are totally engaged in self-realization. So Srila Prabhupada speaks about this in the first chapter of Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada also explains in that first chapter of Bhagavatam that even though this knowledge is meant for the Paramahamsas, he says, however, as soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, by the culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within that person's heart as soon as they hear attentively and submissively. And so hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, even though Prabhupada said it's meant for the Paramahamsas, Prabhupada explains that anyone that hears Srimad Bhagavatam actually becomes purified in the heart. And anyone that hears Bhagavatam can develop this love for God. And so Prabhupada talks about worldly men, people that are engaged in sense gratification, that even such men will find this Vedic literature a remedial measure for their material disease. So in the material world, we know that people are attached to sense gratification. The beginning of Bhagavad Gita helps us to understand how a yogi becomes elevated. And Prabhupada explains in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains to Arjuna how a person that is so attached, the people that are attached to material sense gratification, that there are different ways that people can become purified in order to be able to understand even the super soul. And so here in this text, Srila Prabhupada is also explaining to us that Srimad Bhagavatam is also a means for people to become purified, that by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, then one's heart will become, one's heart can become pure. Prabhupada talks about worldly people, and as we go on in the purport, we will hear about Pravritti Marg and Nivritti Marg, and we'll hear more about the materialist way of thinking and those personalities that are aspiring, that are pure devotees of the Lord. So this main point in this first part is that the hearing of Bhagavatam is performed by professional men, Prabhupada says. When we just hear Bhagavatam from people that are not devotees of the Lord, like the Mayavadis or the impersonalists, Mayavadis, same little tinge of a difference. That these personalities, it's very difficult for them to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. And so Prabhupada says, however, it is the duty of the sane to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from a self-realized soul and not be duped by professional people. So that's an important point in this verse. And one should continue such hearing till the end of one's life, so that one can actually have transcendental association of the Lord and thus be liberated simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So the glories of Bhagavatam, of hearing Bhagavatam, cannot be emphasized enough. That is the path of bhakti, hearing and chanting. So we want to hear from one of the great acharyas of our times, or one of the great acharyas in the Srimad Bhagavatam that is benefiting us in our times. And that's the great Shanaka. So Sukadev Goswami, who Shanaka heard from. So Ekavira Prabhu will talk a little bit about Shukadev Goswami.
And of course, thank you, Prabhu. Of course, we got on so late, so we're kind of like in a rush. So we'll speak briefly about Sukadev Goswami, and then we'll also speak about His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, since this is his Tirubhav Madhotsav. So, of course, as Srila Prabhupada expresses, Srimad Bhagavatam is Um, this is works within the depths of the hearts of those who are worldly men. And as explained in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, if one has material desires, if full of material desires, without material desires, one should come and approach Srimad Bhagavatam and hear the glories of Vasudeva. And so, however, Sukadeva Goswami, he was not that type of personality. Of course, it's explained that Sukadeva Goswami was liberated before he manifested out of the womb, before he took birth. And as we understand his greatness even before taking birth, because he remained in the womb for 16 years. And we see how extraordinary this is. And in the world, we see that Srila Prabhupada expressed that when a baby is in the womb, they go through so many different difficulties. They're being bitten by worms and bacteria. They're in a certain position that would make the greatest of Hatha Yoga experts who have so much dexterity cringe in agony just thinking about that position and being in that position for 16 years. And so here Sukadeva Goswami chose to remain in this particular unfortunate, unconditioned, uncomfortable state because he saw that it was so much worse outside of the womb. And so Srila Vyasadeva trying to beg him to come out, and he wouldn't come until Srila Vyasadeva prayed to the Lord. And of course, Vishnu manifested in the mind of Sukadeva Goswami to encourage him to come out of the womb. And so, and of course, when he came out of the womb, what did he do? He just hit the ground running and ran off into the forest. Vyasadeva is crying out for him, and only the echo of the trees resounded. And so here he is. He had no desire to engage in material life, as Srila Prabhupada explains in this verse, is Nivritti Marga and Pravitti Marga. He had no desire to engage in the Pravitti Marga, material activities. He didn't have that anchor material, rooted in materialism. And so while he's in the forest, he hears the verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. And because he doesn't have this anchor in materialism, he hears the sweetness of Srimad Bhagavatam. And what happens? He's immediately attracted. Where is this personality that you're speaking of? And who is telling you this? Where can I find such a soul? And so again, in the first verse, first canto, we see that the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam, they're relishable even for liberated souls. They don't have this particular anchor in materialism. And so we find in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where it explains that the body is like a boat which crosses the ocean of material suffering. The spiritual master's instructions are there, and he is the captain. And of course, the Supreme Lord is the favorable winds. And so when this material anchor of materialism is not rooted in materialism, when the favorable wind comes by the instructions of the spiritual master, then one becomes more and more attracted and they move across the ocean of material suffering. And so when I think about, of course, Shukadeva Goswami being one of the 12 Mahajans and becoming perfect in his realization by Bhakti-Amam Abhichan Mati, only by devotional service, by engaging in the bhakti, in his particular case, by speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, and of course, Parikshit Maharaj being the recipient of the reception, hearing, and also becoming one of the 12 Mahajans by hearing, the process of hearing.
And so we're encouraged to actually engage in this process primarily as Srila Prabhupada explains, in this easy process of hearing and chanting. And I was reflecting on this one pastime that Srila Prabhupada was illustrating. And it's so simple and so sweet. And he's expressing how the residents of Vrindavan, they are engaged in a sweet way. The boys return from the village and they're speaking to their mothers. Oh, Krishna, he killed this demon, that demon. And the mothers, they're expressing, oh, really? And Srila Prabhupada is just like in the mood of, of a child. And it's so simple and so sweet. And Srila Prabhupada just expresses, he says, they just want to serve Krishna. They just want to serve him. Krishna is the enjoyer. That's it. Just so simple. That's it. And it's not about philosophy. It's not about understanding. They just love him and they want to please him. So somehow or other, Krishna. Somehow or other, Krishna. And that's the instruction for me. Somehow or other, Krishna. Remembering Krishna by first hearing, and then, of course, in our case, chanting the glories of the Lord through speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, but also the simple process which we are given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that kirtanam is chanting the holy names. And so I guess Vraja Lila will speak briefly, and then we'll talk about Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj.
Yeah, we'll share something about Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So as Ekavira shared, Bhagavatam is meant for us to enter into the beautiful, relishable pastimes of the Supreme Lord. That's the purpose of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And as he said, Shukadev Goswami, although he was already realized, by hearing these pastimes of the Lord, he was able to then become realized in bhakti. When we hear the pastimes of Shukadev Goswami, we hear that he was at one time Brahman realized. And by hearing these pastimes of the Lord, by hearing the glorification of the Lord from Vyasadeva, that he, being a lover of the Lord, he was able to then give this Bhagavatam to his disciple Sukha Goswami. And so the thing that I think about is this Kali Yuga. In this Kali Yuga, it's such a precarious time. It's just so difficult. People have no knowledge. People are ignorant. Prabhupada speaks about this in the purport. There's no nivritti. People are just absorbed in privity marg, right? Just absorbed in materialistic endeavors. And so, although this is the condition of Kali Yuga, still personalities like Shukadev Goswami that gave Srimad Bhagavatam to the saints, the rishis, that act of giving, that act of caring, that act of compassion, that act of love is what we are inspired to be able to enter into by the mercy of the spiritual master. And so this parampara system is so very, very important in us being able to disseminate this knowledge from Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada speaks in this purport about the importance of Acharyavan Purusha, that Acharya, one has to hear from the Acharyas, and one has to hear from the right Acharyas, the right source, because there are many people that are professing to be Acharyas in this age of Kali. And unfortunately, people are being duped by some of these people. And so therefore, this system that's set up, the parampara system, Evam parampara praptam imam rajarsaro vidu. This is important for us as aspiring bhaktas to be able to understand ourselves and then to be able to share that with others. That it's important to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. And one last point I was reading in the Chaitanya Charitamrita about the personal servant of Lord Chaitanya, Swarup Damodar. He was the personal secretary. And he says at one point, if you want to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, one must go to the right person whose life is Bhagavatam. So we have the person Bhagavat, which we know for us is Srila Prabhupada. Without Srila Prabhupada's mercy, it would be, none of us would have the opportunity to be able to share Srimad Bhagavatam or hear Srimad Bhagavatam. So this mercy of Srila Prabhupada cannot be underestimated in any way. Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the ISKCON movement, is the person that is the person Bhagavat. He brought the Srimad Bhagavatam, as we all know the stories of Prabhupada coming with three volumes of Bhagavatam. And so those persons, though, that were able to hear from Srila Prabhupada, in their life, they also became exemplary of hearing the message of Bhagavatam, hearing the essence of Bhagavatam. And there are many of those personalities that have heard from Srila Prabhupada that have also become exemplary in their character, in their desires to be able to share Srimad Bhagavatam. And so now we would like to shift just a little bit to sharing some things about His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, given that today is his as we said, his auspicious disappearance day. And so Ekavira will start a little bit of the sharing. We'll share for a few minutes and open for questions.
So His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, he of course was born in Cleveland, Ohio. He was a child evangelist, and he always had the natural inclination towards spiritual life. I remember being there in Cleveland and seeing one of his older teachers, and expressing how, even as a youth, he had this desire to actually speak from the scriptures. People don't know that Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, he had a speech impediment. And so it was very difficult for him to actually communicate. Whenever he tried to enunciate, he would stutter and he would bang on the desk and stomp his feet. He said, but the teacher expressed that he was like that all the time, except for when he started speaking from the scriptures. And when he started speaking from the scriptures, the words would just flow without any problems. And she recalled that one day he used to have classes with other students, and he couldn't get into school. The school was locked. And so he went around to one of the back windows and opened up the window and jumped in through the window of the school to open the door so he can continue with this class. And this was the eagerness that he had to actually hear from the scriptures and then also share it. And so we'll fast forward into his time in Princeton, and there was a certain parallel that I saw in his life and the life of personalities who are not steeped in deep material desires, having those particular material desires. And so he had two primary spiritual teachers, and one of which he was teaching him mysticism and reading minds and different mystic cities. And I remember when I first met Bhaktitirtha Maharaj and him displaying some of those aspects, like reading the minds. In one of the lectures, he expressed something, and I said, oh boy, I have to. Anyway, when he was going through this process of learning with the teacher, he was bored. And he expressed to the teacher, he said, I'm engaged in this activity, but this is really boring for me. And the teacher said that, that's because your area is bhakti. And he said, bhakti, what is that? He said, devotional service. Really? And I'm not your guru. And so he didn't think of it, much of it at that point in time. And then later on, he said, well, you expressed that, I'm not supposed to be engaged in this. My area is bhakti. Well, why are we doing this? He said, well, this is something that you'll need to learn and be sensitive to in your future service. But again, I'm not your guru. That was the second time. And so the third time, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj asked him, he said, you said that you are not my spiritual master, my guru. Then who is my guru? And his teacher asked him, he said, do you really want to know? And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj said, yes, I want to know. He said, are you sure you really want to know? And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj expressed, yes, I want to know. And he asked him the third time, he said, are you sure you want to know? And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj expressed, yes, I want to know. He said, do you ever see those persons out on the street and they look like they have on these yellow and orange bed sheets and they're singing on the streets and they're chanting these mantras? And he said, you mean the Hare Krishnas? And he said, yes, Hare Krishnas. Their spiritual master is your guru. And he said, you mean to tell me that those people on the street have higher knowledge and their spiritual master is my spiritual master? He said, yes, their spiritual master is your spiritual master. And so he was engaging in this activity, and he was just totally shocked. He said he just couldn't believe it. It took a while for him to actually accept. And then he saw his other spiritual master, and this spiritual master was a well-known, prominent teacher, and he asked him about Srila Prabhupada. He said, yes, this person is Jagat Guru. And said, well, what's that? He said, Jagat Guru is a spiritual teacher of the whole world. He said, and actually, many of us who came from India, we came to the West and we're supposed to help him. And, we try in many different ways, but we really were supposed to help him more because he is Jagat Guru. He has a deeper understanding of the relationship with the Supreme Lord. And so he was encouraged by both of his teachers. And so he went to see these devotees, and it was still such a struggle for him to accept. And then he got one recording of Srila Prabhupada's lectures. And he was engaged at this period of time. He lived with his fiancée. And he took this recording back to the apartment. And he recalled that he put this recording on, and as soon as he put on the recording, he heard the voice of Srila Prabhupada. And he expressed that when he heard the voice of Srila Prabhupada, tears just started running down his face. He said it was almost like he had been arrested. He knew that he could no longer go on in his life the way that he could go on. And he was crying profusely. So much so that his fiancée heard him from the other room, and she came into the room and she consoled him and said, what's wrong? What's wrong? He said, this is my spiritual master. I've been looking for him. And this is my spiritual master. I can't continue to go on. I have to leave. And he expressed it. I just have to leave. I can't continue. And that night he couldn't even sleep. He just remained up, and the next morning he had his bags packed and he left. Never to return to that particular situation, to live in the temple and hear Srimad Bhagavatam from his beloved spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada.
So we just realized we're getting close to the end of our time of sharing, which is almost 9 o'clock. So we want to thank you all so very, very much. We're so very grateful. So there's so many things about Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's life that we can share.
Actually,
However,
I just wanted to say, since we did start late, don't feel like you have to meet like the normal timeline. You can go long if we have to.
Okay, I just was noticing the time, and I like to be very, conscious of time.
She was noticing the time, and she was kicking me under the table.
I was like, let's not go over the time that we were told to go over. Okay, so okay, thank you very much. So were you complete with what you were sharing?
It's okay, go ahead. Yeah, you can.
Anyway, I think the thing is to just relate the verse, to Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj and his life, and to him hearing from Srila Prabhupada, and how by hearing, as we're hearing that Shukadeva Goswami heard from Vyasadeva, how Vyasadeva actually heard from Narada Muni, and how this knowledge of Bhagavatam is passed down in disciplic succession. And as Ekavira Prabhu shared at the end, where Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj heard Srila Prabhupada's voice, and so by hearing his voice, he knew within his heart. This is what the verse is sharing. This is what Bhagavatam, the first chapter of the first chapter of Bhagavatam in the second part explains that all of the miseries that is in one's heart will become will be relieved. We will be relieved of any miseries that's in the heart. And so this is what happened for Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. He was very involved in so many things professionally in material life. However, when he heard Srila Prabhupada, immediately he knew that he needed to surrender his life to hearing more from Srila Prabhupada. And so by him hearing from Srila Prabhupada, he was able to utilize his life in such a way that he could bring others to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And so this is how we, the disciples of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, have been able to hear from Srila Prabhupada continuously, because personally in my life, when I met Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj in 1979, and as I got to know him more, I had never seen someone that loved another person as much as I saw how much Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj loved Srila Prabhupada. And the way, when we think of love, I think for me, coming from the material world in 1979, and not knowing anything about love as we learn from Bhagavatam, when I met. During the time that I was serving Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, I could see for him, the way I understood love is that he would do anything for Srila Prabhupada, anything. I remember when he first went to Africa, and he just had a dream, and Srila Prabhupada showed him in this dream faces of people that were from another country. And when he saw those faces, he knew immediately that he had to leave and go to Africa. And so then immediately he left. Immediately he came and told us the next morning. He said, I'm sorry, I have to go. And within 3 days of him telling us that in the restaurant, he actually packed his bags and got his passport and he left, and he was gone. And so we were then thinking, how is it that he could just do that? How is it that he could just wake up one morning and said, I got instructions from a dream and I need to go. And so that is the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam. And that is the purport of us reaching out during this age of Kali to give others this knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam, that it makes one fall in love. And ultimately, we know that it's falling in love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, it comes through the medium of the spiritual master, as explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Adi Lila, in the beginning of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's expressed, it's explained about the spiritual master and how the spiritual master gives the mercy. And so Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj has been that example, for all people all over the world, and most especially his disciples. He encourages us, to take shelter of the scriptures. He encourages us to follow the instructions of the acharyas. He encourages us to live our lives as if we are examples of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can read the Bhagavatam and we can quote many verses, and so many things we can share about Srimad Bhagavatam. However, what we learned from Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, what I learned, is that Bhagavatam is to be practiced. Bhagavatam is a daily application. And by that daily application, then one becomes a person Bhagavad. And so this is what we've learned in the life of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And so today we're honoring his departure. It's a sad time for a disciple because it's not easy when the spiritual master leaves untimely. And none of us were really prepared for him to leave. However, his instructions live and will always live. And his instructions is his example of how much he loved Srila Prabhupada and how much he gave his life in dedication to Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's mission. So for that, we are very, very, very grateful. Okay, Ekavira, you had anything else you'd like to share?
No, it's okay. Yes. We can open up for questions if devotees would like to ask something, especially about the life of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. I guess while we're waiting for questions, I'll just reiterate that particular story of Srila Prabhupada. It's
Srila
okay.
Prabhupada.
On Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he expressed that in his service to Srila Prabhupada, whenever even when Srila Prabhupada was on the planet, whenever there was a major turning point in his life, a major instruction, Srila Prabhupada would come to him in a dream and give him some instruction. And so, as Raja Lila was sharing at the restaurant in Washington, D.C., it was a very successful restaurant, and things were going on very nicely. The devotees were distributing books, and so many people in the Washington, D.C. area were coming to their restaurant. And so that evening when he had this dream with Srila Prabhupada, he was massaging Srila Prabhupada's feet. And then someone knocked on the door. There was a sound on the door. And Srila Prabhupada said, "You can stop and go get the door. That's for you." And then Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he continued to massage Srila Prabhupada, and another rap came on the door. And Srila Prabhupada said, "It's okay, you can stop. Just go answer the door. There's somebody for you." And then another knock came on the door, and Srila Prabhupada said, "Would you stop? Go to the door. There's somebody waiting for you." And so Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj went over to the door, and when he opened the door, it was a French door. And he recalled that as he opened both doors, and when he opened both doors, there were hundreds of people, and there were children, and they came and they were just jumping all over him. And they were from the continent, from Africa. And then Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj turned and looked at Srila Prabhupada laying in the bed, and Srila Prabhupada was smiling, and he said, "See, I told you, there's somebody waiting for you." And so that's where Raja Lila expressed that, that next day he said, "I have to go. I must leave." And he got his visa and his ticket, and in 3 days he was off to Africa for years.
For 10 years. And I remember within a year of that, I remember we asked him, I was new, it was 1979. I was like, "Okay, so what's supposed to happen to me?" And he said, "Don't worry, I've arranged for you to go to New York and you'll get trained in book distribution." So I was in New York Temple getting trained by wonderful devotees. Some of the devotees are there in Alacho, Ananda, Ragatmika. These are all the devotees that just showered me in this love, in this understanding of bhakti, what bhakti really means. They took such amazing care of me in the absence of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj having gone to Africa, and they trained me in book distribution. Going out, Nanda took me, Ragatmika took me under her wing and took me out every day. And it was just such an amazing period of learning about the science of bhakti. And then after a year, 1 year of getting trained in New York Temple in Brooklyn, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj told me, okay, he sent a message. Now you got to go to Africa. Now I want you to come. And so within a year, I found myself in 1980 going to Africa with a one-way ticket. And that was the training that we received from him. He had so much devotion and dedication to Srila Prabhupada. He knew Srila Prabhupada wanted that. Brahmananda Prabhu was in Nigeria at the time. He didn't have any association. There was no one there. We needed to open a temple. Temples followed after that. And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj just gave up that restaurant just like that. Just said, okay, I got to go. Prabhupada wants me. And I've seen so many times he's done that. He's done that with coming to Gitanagari. He's done that coming to Washington, D.C., where he just, understood what Srila Prabhupada, his spiritual master, wanted in terms of spreading this mission, in terms of helping people to understand the real meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, yes, is there anyone that has any comments? You don't have to have questions. I see Bhagavati is so kindly listening.
Prabhu's Mother Akadashi was asking if you could tell more about Maharaj's final days.
Well, Maharaj's final days.
Yeah, today's his disappearance. So he's written a book, Died Before Dying, and when he wrote that book, we were together with him in Hawaii. That's after he was diagnosed with melanoma cancer. So we had taken him several places, Mexico, California, Palm Springs, where Radha Dasi and her mother offered us a place for Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj to stay. Yudhishthira Prabhu, Radha Dasi's husband. This is all while we were going through what we thought was a healing process, that maybe he would possibly not leave his body at that time. So we were with him. We were with him during the time when he left his body. We were with him for 1 year. And when it got a little serious, a lot more serious, we thought we would go to Hawaii so that he could be away from everything, because he was still involved. In Mexico, he was preaching like anything to anybody that was coming to that clinic. When we took him to Palm Springs, he would still do programs. So we thought, okay, let's go a little bit far away. So we took him to Hawaii. And that's where he became a little more still, and he wrote this book, Died Before Dying. And so every day Ekavira Prabhu would take him down, to sit at in a seat facing the ocean, and he would write. So this book, Died Before Dying, it's the beggar for. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj has written 18 books. Actually, yes, 18. And this book specifically speaks about the process that he was going through. He shares it in his meditations. So in any case, that period was a very difficult period, having served him from 1979 until now, the time he's leaving his body, 2005. And so he's experiencing this melanoma, this cancer, and he's detaching from the material world in the sense of being a preacher. because for the devotees that are representative of Srila Prabhupada, their lives are connected to teaching and preaching. That's their whole life. Like we saw Satsarup Maharaj recently on some of the programs with Madan Gopal and his team and the team there in Tawako. Absolutely, Satsarup Maharaj's life is dedicated to the fact that he writes about Srila Prabhupada. He writes about glorifying Srila Prabhupada. And that's his whole life. That's what he's dedicated to. So Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj has always been dedicated also in his way to bringing Krishna consciousness in ways that people could digest. So he would always be thinking of strategies and ways to get the conditioned souls, people that may not be attracted to Krishna consciousness, to come to somehow get a little taste of Krishna. And so when he was leaving his body, it was a period of him detaching from what we've known of him, his mood of preaching and his mood of sharing. And so we were also having to be a part of that. And it's I guess Ekavira maybe can share something that might be relevant to his leaving in that sense, because for me, he's still very much present every day. It's very much present. And that was a little bit of a difficult time. At the same time, it's a really important time because he taught us so much about leaving the body. So that was really important for us. He taught us how to leave the body. Okay.
Yes, as Lila shared, we were in Mexico, and in this clinic, it was a small clinic with about, it had a capacity of maybe 12 patients, except 12 patients at a time on site, and then they had other patients in different areas. But every day when Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was there, he'd undergo his treatment, and it would take hours, maybe like at least 5 or 6 hours a day. And as he was sitting there, the doctor would bring a guest. Say, this is someone I want you to meet. Here, this is the Swami. And then the person would sit down. And it started with just the doctor on the staff, the lead doctor of the clinic. And then it branched out to some other staff doctors. And each day there were one person, and then there was 2 people. And we were there for 3 weeks, I think it was.
Yeah, quite some time.
Yeah. By the time he left, there was a whole little front room, like auditorium, small auditorium, where the doctor had invited people, and this is in Tijuana, from as far in the States, all around Tijuana, different physicians of the other clinics there in Tijuana, but then also persons from the San Diego area and as far up to, Washington State. There were people that came there to actually see this Swami in the clinic. Mm-hmm. And he was expressing, just principles of Krishna consciousness. And so Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, as we were going through this process, serving him for the years that we served him, we always saw how he would have effect on people's lives. He had a tremendous ability to affect the hearts of people, regardless of the area in which they were from, race, nationality, sex, religious inclination. He had the ability to affect hearts. And I remember this one quote, and it's really profound, and it's something that's worthy to remember and to write down especially for devotees. And he expressed that it's a simple definition about preaching. And he said that preaching means to remove the obstacles that keep one from accepting Krishna. And that was his life. That was his life. He would go into a given area and he would find out the needs and the interests of the persons there. Even if he didn't know directly, Krishna would help him to understand the needs of these people. It was just such amazing to just see how he would transform people's hearts, especially during that last year when he was going through the dying process. In such a short period of time, wherever he went, from San Diego and as Rajalila expressed, and then we went to Palm Springs or Palm Desert, Palm Springs. In Palm Springs. And I remember they were having home programs, and I was administering Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's medical treatments. And each day, again, we go through a rigorous form, different types of treatments for at least 6 hours. And this one day, he was supposed to do a program, and he hadn't eaten all day. He just didn't have any appetite. And then he just started regurgitating. And he kept throwing up. And he kept throwing up. Every 15 or 20 minutes, he would go up to the bathroom, but he hadn't eaten. And so he would close the bathroom door behind him. And this one time I went there and I knocked on the door and I said, "Come on, let me in, Guru Maharaj." And then I just opened the door and he was wiping the blood away from his mouth. But he didn't want us to actually see this because, of course, I said, "No, we need to address this." And he said, "No, I'm okay. I'm okay." Mm-hmm. And he was so weak. It was so hard for him to even just walk from the bathroom and sit in his chair in the room. And when the time came for him to do this program, I said, "We need to cancel the program, Guru Maharaj." He said, "No, these people, they're coming from all over the area. And some people have come from out of town. And they planned this." He said, "No, we won't disappoint them. They're expecting me." And so we helped him into the car. He had a cane at that point in time. He was walking with a cane in one hand, and I had the other hand. And we went into the car, and Yudhisthira came to pick us up. And then we went to this program. And when we got into the program, I grabbed his arm as we were walking in, and he kind of pushed my hand away and started walking into the program by himself. And then he sat down and he had this brilliant and effulgent smile. And it was as if nothing was wrong. And he just spoke for hours. He spoke for hours. And the people, there were a lot of new people there who were new to Krishna consciousness. And then after the program, a few hours later, we got back in the car, and then when we got back in the car, he just dropped. He was just so weak. So weak.
Yeah.
And that's who he was. He'd give his all in trying to bring people to Krishna consciousness and bring them to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah. So I was just thinking there was a question that I saw, and I wanted us to make sure to answer that question. But I think Padmalochana, Haribo, thank you so much for asking that question. Yes, Maharaj did go into the Black community.
In America to give guidance. Okay.
Yeah, he did. He did go into the Black community. I guess this is the elephant in the room, and I guess we will. I guess we're being requested to address this. Yes. However, what was interesting is when we came back from Africa, Bhakti Tirthamaj again had a communication with Srila Prabhupada. Don't ask me how that happened. Sometimes it was in dreams. Sometimes it was in his chanting. There was many ways that he would have connection with Srila Prabhupada. And he could understand that he needed to connect. He needed to bring Black people, quote unquote, closer, or to give them an opportunity to be able to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, to hear the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. And so during that time, what happened, as I said earlier, Bhakti Tirthamaj always had strategies in his preaching. As you know, he had traveled throughout Europe to give Srila Prabhupada's books. So he was on the team with Satsarup Maharaj for many, many years in devising all kinds of ways to give Srimad Bhagavatam to people. So he even was in the communist countries, right? So that was his mood. He was always thinking of ways to give Krishna consciousness. So during this time when we came back from Africa, having been there for, like I said, almost 10 years, there was a movement going on, which was, I believe, African Americans were becoming more Afrocentric, so to speak. They were becoming more aware of the African culture. And so Bhakti Tirthamaj jumped on that, and he took advantage of that. And what he did at that time was to go into the professional Black African American culture and share with them the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, and in hopes and prayers that they in turn would share it with other people of color and in general all people, not just African Americans. However, his intention was to get African Americans to become aware of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Srila Prabhupada empowered him to do that. So he was very successful. He had a strategy. And so we had one person that came forward. Prabhupada always sends one person, always, every place, anywhere anybody ever goes to pioneer Prabhupada's mission, he will send one person. And that one person that came, she was a professor at one university. And she arranged for Bhakti Tirthamaj to start speaking at that university. Her name is Chantamani, and the university was Howard University. And Bhakti Tirthamaj started teaching there in the university, and we started getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that would come to hear him. And he would he would share the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, and he would share it in a way that the people, the urban professional Black-bodied people at the time who had huge false egos, he gave it to them in ways that the huge false egos, in the sense that that professional people are usually attached to materialism, and so in order to penetrate that, he actually gave Srimad Bhagavatam in ways that people could digest. He gave the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam in ways that people could digest. Now, what happened from that going out into the community, many people questioned Bhakti Tirthamaj at that time. Why is he wearing African clothes? Why is he dressing the way he's dressing? Many people didn't understand that was the external paraphernalia that was needed to connect with those personalities, because they were at that time in that mode of thinking of the clothing was important, the externals were important. So he did the externals so that he can then give Srimad Bhagavatam. And so many of those persons that he spoke to eventually became the persons that came to Gita Nagari to assist in the Gita Nagari project, to care for Shri Shri Radha Damodar. These persons had then been introduced to Srimad Bhagavatam, to the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, and they became purified, and in that way able to take on more responsibilities in the service of Srila Prabhupada. So yes, it is important. Like now, the protests are going on, and there are many people protesting. It's not just blacks, there's whites, there's everybody. So There need to be strategies to go into these environments to be able to utilize ways that we can give people Krishna consciousness. That's our mission. That's our only goal. I mean, it's like, yes, we want to go into all communities. However, Krishna arranges different things to happen, on our planet. And so when these things happen, then we can jump on those situations and we can, because we're all prepared. We have Prashadam distribution, we have book distribution, we have how many other ways we've devised to give Krishna consciousness. The challenge that we have often in giving Krishna consciousness is to give people the care and the love that goes along with the teachings of Krishna consciousness. This is our challenge, oftentimes. And so we are being called, each person, each one of us, to be able to take the teachings that we have learned from Srila Prabhupada and apply it in our lives in terms of compassion, in terms of having empathy. These are important tools that we personally all need to utilize in the Krishna consciousness movement so that we can go and give the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. That this is what the pure devotees, they do. Throughout Bhagavatam, everyone's mission in Bhagavatam, so many of the stories, Chaitanya Charitamrita also, they're based on personalities devising ways to bring people back to Krishna. Ultimately, that's the mission. That's our only mission, right? That's what Prabhupada gave everything for, to help us to learn how to give Krishna consciousness, to make a house where everybody could live. And so this is built, though, on a foundation of caring for other people. It's important to care. If we give somebody the teachings of Bhagavatam and then we somehow not able to show them the love that comes from Bhagavatam, then it won't connect. It won't work. So this is what Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, this was what he reached out to. After not even very long of reaching out to in the African American community, then white-bodied people started coming. And so everybody was coming, all kinds of people were coming, and all kinds of people were surrendering to the process of Krishna consciousness, and still are. And we keep the same message. Let's care for each other. Let's show each other how Bhagavatam is to be lived. The thing that everyone knows about Srila Prabhupada is how much he loved everyone. That's what I saw with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. I saw that kind of commitment, dedication to Srila Prabhupada, that kind of love. And so that's what's lacking sometimes. Not always, not everywhere. It's let me, you can tell me you love me, but let me feel it. let me feel it. And I think that's all bodies need that. All bodies need to know that they're cared for, they're going to be protected. They want to know that they're going to have some security. I mean, yes, we're in the material world, and yes, all of these things seems not so important. However, as long as we have these human bodies, some of these things are really important. And so we need to find ways of how we can do that, how we can reach out. We're loving beings in the Krishna consciousness movement. How do we give that?
There's a saying, I was just thinking about what Roger Lila was sharing. There's a saying, people don't want to know how much you know. They want to know how much you, what is it? Don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care. And so the personalities that afford basic people that come to Krishna, turn to Krishna, and those personalities that come for pure understanding, pure knowledge, those personalities are rare. Most of us are looking for love. We're looking for, basically to recreate our family dynamics. And so that was something that the institute in which Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj created. He understood that. And so therefore, it was called the Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology, because he expressed that the world is not in want of persons who know the scriptures and repeat the scriptures. The world is in want or lacking of personalities who live the scriptures. Even if we only know very little, but we actually apply that in our lives. And so therefore, in all communities, he was endeared, and he didn't beat someone over the head with the scriptures, just being a loving person. Sometimes I remember going to get some glasses with him, and someone was repairing his glasses, and the person he was coughing. And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj said, "Why are you coughing so much, George?" And the person said, "Well, I just have something in my throat." He said, "You want me to get you some water?" And he said, "No, I'll be okay." He said, "No, take your time. Go get some water and everything. Put the glasses here. We'll be here. Just go deal with your cough." And then George went to get, he said, what is your name? And as the time went on, they had a conversation. It was like they were longtime friends. And after he finished repairing the glasses for Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he said, "No, this is on me. Please take it. Thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it, our discussion." And it was just a simple interaction, and it wasn't that he was, speaking direct philosophy, but he was speaking to this person in such a way that this person became favorable to a devotee. And so we see, like in, Sanatana Goswami, and like the prayers to the Goswamis. The six Goswamis they were endeared by the saintly personalities and the other end of the spectrum, those that were considered to be, ruffians. And you would just go into the village, and it wasn't, how was your bhajan? How's your bhajan? Yes, for those who had that adhikar, he met them at that level, but others, it was how is your health? How are your crops? How are your crops this year? Your daughter, did she get married? Speaking to the interests of people and endearing, touching the hearts of persons. And so the Institute was a place in which was like, for me, for instance, it was a family. It was something that, I was seeking in the external society, but it was absent in the external society. But it was there in the Institute, rooted in the understanding, the Harikatha, rooted in the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. And Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, you never, just like Srila Prabhupada's books, many people have read Srila Prabhupada's books and it affects them, but they may not give credit to Srila Prabhupada's books. And in all walks of life. But you can see the effects of Srila Prabhupada's books. You hear certain things that, oh yeah, they got that from Srila Prabhupada, the Bhagavad Gita as it is, not just the Bhagavad Gita, but Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And so, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, his books were written to form a bridge to bring people to Srila Prabhupada. And I remember one godbrother was traveling on a flight from Washington, D.C. to California, and he was on the flight with, what's his name, Stedman, Oprah Winfrey's lifelong partner, husband. And so he met him and he presented him with a book, because at that point in time, Stedman was an attorney and he was teaching at the University of Chicago, leadership. He was teaching a leadership course. And so he handed him the book, and he said, I just want to present this gift to you. And Stedman said, wow, thank you. I really appreciate this. I teach a course on leadership. Said, and actually, this is written by this person, B.T. Swami. This is volume 2. I have volume 1. And so, yes, I teach some of the principles that he gives in the book in my courses. And even out in the boondocks of Gita Nagari, we had some experience where the devotees, Dhruva and Parijata, they came from South Africa, and they came to take on the services here in Gita Nagari. And they were applying for a grant, and they were also trying to develop relationships with one of the county administrators. And so they went into this administrator's office, and the secretary told them that, okay, he'll see you, but he only has a few minutes. So, just understand that his time is limited. So they went into the office, and they introduced themselves, and the person said, oh, you're at that time, they called it Gita Nagari, the yoga farm. He said, yoga? Are you related to anything, in Swamis, yoga and Swamis? And he said, yes. He's like, wow, I'm reading this book on leadership. It's written by this person, B.T. Swami. And it's amazing. It's one of the best books on leadership that I've ever experienced, ever read. And they just started laughing. And he said, why are you laughing? I said, well, B.T. Swami, he was the director at our center. And he said, no way. And they asked him, well, how did you get the book? And he said, well, I ordered it on Amazon. I just thought it had an interesting title, and I just ordered it. He said, this is the best book I've ever seen on leadership. And then, he's been a lifelong, for the last 10 years, he's been an ally of the farm. It's anything that they want in regards to the county, they can just call him up. He comes here on a weekly basis and engages in, hatha yoga. And so we never really know how these books go out and how they affect people, even in this little corner of the world called Port Royal, Pennsylvania. These books have an effect.
Mm. Yeah. So in conclusion, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's departure, and one of the most important aspects of his life was to establish in our institution awareness of the importance of when we reach out, how to reach out with care. Now, we had to develop this in our institution. We had several people, including some of our leaders, met for 7 years. I think we started going to these meetings. We went for at least 5 or 6 years in order to develop one course in our institution that's called devotee care. Why was there a reason to develop a course for devotee care if we all cared? If we're reading Srila Prabhupada's books and we're, hearing these messages and we're applying these messages in our lives, then why did we develop devotee care? We had to sit and write this course. And so, having been a really integral part of developing that course, we did research and we found all the areas that people didn't feel cared for. I mean, we had like a list of about 25 or 30 areas together with Rasamandala Prabhu, this research. And so people do not feel cared for in our institution. Whether we're Black or we're white or whatever, or we're Hispanic or we're Indian or we're whatever, oftentimes people do not feel cared for. And what we do is, this is becoming very, this word is becoming very known in our society now, we have done what is called spiritual bypass, where we give people the philosophy and the holy names, and we say, just, that's it, chant, and be happy, which is a fact. Read the Srimad Bhagavatam and get purified. Yes. At the same time, though, we also need to be humanitarians with our humanity with each other. And so this course, devotees take this course in Mayapur every year. It's a course. It's an official GBC course to care for each other. So which is the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? To care so that we can bring the holy name to people's hearts and change and make transformation. So I guess, as I said earlier, Bhaktitirtha Maharaj would want us to be doing that since his departure. Would be wanting us to express this care with each other, express this care for people in the world that are suffering. Everybody's, that's just a part of the conditioned world that we live in. People will suffer. There will be miseries. Krishna's external energy arranges that. As I said earlier, Krishna arranges through his external energies so many different situations to help us so that we can take shelter of what's really important. And at this time, what's important is for us to care with each other, care for each other. How we express that may be different, how we express that care. One way I see that we can care for each other now is to be able to understand each other a little better, to really understand. In this process of Krishna consciousness, we have weaknesses and we have strengths. By the mercy of the Guru, we are learning about our weaknesses and our strengths. And we take shelter of the teachings of the great acharyas, and we take shelter of each other to help each other with those weaknesses. Not that we judge each other for our weaknesses. Not that we look down at each other. Not that we think, I know more than you do. No. It's really about us being able to be exemplary for the world. So this is our call right now, to be exemplary for the world. And I believe that Bhaktitirtha Maharaj is smiling because there's so many people in our Krishna consciousness movement that are exemplary for the world. But it doesn't mean we can't get better. We can always get better. And so this is our message from what we've learned from Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, and for us to apply it ourselves. How are we getting better? How are we getting better in becoming examples of devotees that have character, starting with compassion and starting with empathy for other people? Thank you so very much. And thank you again for inviting us. We're very grateful to have been a part of the community. There's so many devotees there that have loved me, that have taken care of me, that have trained me in my Krishna consciousness, that I am eternally grateful and eternally indebted to. It is their kindness, their love, their way of showing me that Krishna consciousness means being inclusive. Krishna consciousness means being kind and compassionate and caring. It's what I saw from some of these devotees that took care of me for 1 year that makes me able to speak the way I'm able to speak now. And that came from the mercy of Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, and that came from the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so very much.
Thank you all. Thank you again. There's so many devotees in Alacha. We miss all of you so much.
We do.
We really do. So we really appreciate you bringing us, giving us the opportunity to come and bring forth Bhaktitirtha Maharaj's presence in the Alachua community on this very special day, the disappearance.
Taigora Haribol, Hari Hari, Haribol.
Haribol, Prabhus, thank you so much for sharing all of your realizations and your remembrances of Bhaktitirtha Maharaj. I'm not sure if you saw, but I just wanted to mention that some of your godbrothers and well-wishers were just in the chat mentioning Sesha Prabhu says, all glories to my wonderful friends and godbrothers. Other Kirtaniya says, thank you, Vraja, Lila, and Ekavira Prabhus. Let's see. I believe Mother Vegavati had chimed in a little bit earlier, just saying Hari Bol. Yeah. And I think this one devotee was asking about something about Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's desire to take on the karma of living entities, of all living entities. Is that something that you could briefly touch on?
We'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about Vasudev Datta. Before we go into Vasudev Datta, we want to thank Ekadashi Devi
And you, Damodar. Also.
and you, the Prabhus, because of you working together to move through that bit of a pause earlier. Somehow the program is going on. So we thank you both for being in the background and you know, having us able to share with other devotees. Thank you both so very much.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So as we expressed that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's desire was to try to somehow bring people closer to Srila Prabhupada and to Krishna. And one of his daily meditations was, you know, what am I doing today to actually mitigate the suffering of others? That was something that he meditated on for years. And as he traveled throughout the world, he was trying to encourage devotees to actually develop the 6 loving exchanges, the deep, deep 6 loving exchanges, not just, you know, speak about it, but to actually really, really develop these relationships, loving relationships. And as we expressed that most of us are trying to recreate this family dynamic. And so when we come into our spiritual community and we don't have this particular need fulfilled, then there's some lacking. And so therefore Bhaktivinoda Thakur expressed it. There are 4 basic needs. And if one does not have these needs fulfilled in our spiritual communities, then that member or that person will go outside of the community to fulfill those needs. 4 needs: spiritual, emotional, social, and physical. And so he was traveling, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was traveling throughout the world, and he was just saddened by seeing some of the interactions that were taking place among the devotees. And he was also seeing how no matter where he went, he saw that devotees were not happy in the process of Krishna consciousness. And even though he tried so much and he tried to encourage as many people as he possibly could, he was praying to Srila Prabhupada and he said, what is it that I can do that could help to mitigate the suffering of others? And he expressed that, you know, I've done everything that I possibly could do. I don't have the ability. It's only Krishna that can mitigate the suffering of the devotees throughout the world. But at the same time, I'm going to pray to Srila Prabhupada and to Krishna to somehow, in some way, to use me as an instrument. Some years before he made this particular prayer in 2004, there was a lecture that he gave in Mayapur Dham. It's called Protecting Srila Prabhupada's House. And he was expressing back then, I think it was 1997 or 98, one of the two. He was expressing the challenges that devotees were having around and how we're actually, you know, bringing pain to the heart of Srila Prabhupada, mainly by the way that we're dealing with each other and not caring for each other. And so in this 2004 prayer, he just asked Srila Prabhupada and asked Krishna that there's anything that I can do, if you could somehow, some way, just
to mitigate the struggles that devotees have so they could be happy in their performance of devotional service and enlivened in their services. Please give me their particular karma so that they can actually be happy. And so in the mood of Vasudev Dutt, he actually made that prayer. And he wrote his offering to Srila Prabhupada in early 2004. I think it was around February 2004. And in June, actually before June, we started noticing some things, some changes as far as his stamina, for instance. And then we went to Rath Yatra in New York in June. And this was one of the first times after the Rath Yatra. He normally would dance all throughout the entire procession. And then after the procession, he would be wringing with perspiration. And so I would have to bring an extra set of clothes and then some towel, and then he would go and he would dry off and then change cloth, and then I, take the wet cloth from him. But this was the first time that I experienced after the Rath Yatra. He came to me and he said, I'm extremely tired. And he was leaning on my shoulder. He said, I'm extremely tired. He said, please go get the car. I'm just going to sit right here. And then we need to go. We need to go back to Gitanagari. And this was rare for him to see him in this way. And so we got the car and we took him back we got prasad, and then we stopped at some point and he could honor prasadam at one of the road stop areas, the rest areas. And so we gradually saw certain things taking place. And Gitanagari Rath Yatra, he just didn't have the energy. And then when he went to Toronto Rath Yatra,
which we tried to stop him from
we tried to actually ask him not to go to.
Yeah.
And he went. He said, no, the devotees, they're expecting me there. And so I'm going. And he went there, and then we received the call. They called that evening after the Rath Yatra. And the devotees were saying, Maharaj is in excruciating pain. He can't sleep, and he's asking you to come get him. We're in Pennsylvania, there in Toronto. He said, so what we're doing, we're trying to arrange for him to get a ride to Detroit. And then if you can drive to Detroit and pick him up there, meet the devotees halfway, and then take him back to the doctor. He wants to go, he needs to go to the doctor. The doctor's here. They said he needs to see a doctor soon, immediately. And so then we went to go get him from Detroit. And of course, we brought him back to Washington, D.C. And the doctors here in Washington, D.C., Madhvacharya and Murari Gupta Prabhus, they were his caretakers, physicians. So they made an appointment for him, and he went to see a doctor. And they examined his foot. And then I've digressed slightly because for some time he had a growth on his foot. It was about the size of, at one point it was about the size of maybe a golf ball. And it gradually grew and got larger and larger. And I remember seeing a medical medium, if you will, and she was expressing when she saw his foot, he was on his left foot. And as soon as he came into the room, she looked at him and she said, ooh, she was from China. She said, ooh, he's a special personality. And then she looked at his foot and she said, this is not you. She examined subtly. She said, this is not you. This is from the work that you do. So it was his left foot, his receiving foot. And when he started taking disciples, this particular growth manifested, and it continued to grow on his foot. And so this growth had gotten to the size of like a small grapefruit. And when they went to the doctor in Washington, D.C., they said, we need to operate. We need to just remove this. Because it had been examined previously, and there was an biopsy that was done, and it was a malignant growth. However, they didn't remove it at that point in time because it would have affected his mobility. And during that time, he was, that year, I remember going to the appointment, and he had traveled to almost 40 countries that year. And he didn't want to decrease his preaching, his activities, and reaching the devotees. And so they performed the operation, and they called us back a few days later, and that's when they gave the diagnosis that this particular tumor was no longer benign, it was actually malignant. And that was the result of his prayer.
Yes, yes. Actually, at that time too, something that, because we are members of the Grahasta Vision team, and I'm bringing this for us to share, simply because one of the things that troubled him during those times was the amount of divorce we had in our Krishna consciousness movement. He really couldn't understand it, and he would meet with Grihasta couples all over the world, and somehow I don't know now if we did the research, if it's still as like it was back in those years. There were divorces were happening just on an incredibly high rate, and so he was trying to reach out to Grihasta couples, trying to understand what is happening, what is going on internally in these relationships. I mean, he would meet with couples all over the world personally, just trying to understand what need is it that you might have that somehow this other person is not understanding. What kinds of feelings are going on with you that this other person may not understand? How can we bridge these different feelings and different needs that people have, and incorporate our scriptures in that, and try to practically live, this philosophy, at the same time understand these different challenges that might be there in an individual. So there were many things that concerned him socially in that was kind of like social problems in our spiritual movement. And these social problems were not getting addressed. And so he wanted that those social problems would get addressed. And so this was another reason why he had that prayer, because it for him, he saw people were suffering because most of us didn't have tools. Most of us were not trained with tools to address some of the concerns that we may have from our social and material conditioning. We know that Bhagavatam is definitely the cure, and we know, well, we have some theoretical understanding, chanting Hare Krishna. At the same time, somehow being able to on a daily basis apply the teachings of Bhagavatam and apply the purity of the chanting of the holy names, being with Krishna personally, somehow for some people was not helping. Was not that it wasn't helping, it was helping. However, it may not show on a daily basis how people were daily addressing their different issues. Because definitely the purification of chanting the holy names and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam will relieve us from any misery that we may have. However, on a daily basis, and if we're not chanting purely, if we're not hearing, chant the Bhagavatam submissively, attentively from a bona fide spiritual master, then the tendency is that we may still be engrossed in some of our social material conditionings. And so because of this, these different challenges that different devotees were having and didn't know how to address, and were either they filled with shame because we have this very high philosophy, or it was troubling. It was very troubling for him, and so he made that prayer. And I do believe since his departure that we have addressed many of some of these concerns on a more personal level with individuals. Like I said, I don't know if the divorce rate has decreased. However, we now have a Grihastha ministry that have classes before marriage, so people can learn before marriage some of the things that they may need to face during marriage, or in general, just people that want to live together, that they can understand some of the challenges that they may face due to their social material conditioning. So, yeah, these are some of the reasons why he said that prayer. And I wanted to just share one last thing, how grateful I am to those devotees that when I came to Krishna consciousness, and I had the care, directly of Bhaktitirtha Maharaj. However, he left, right? And just soon after I became a devotee, he went to Africa, and it was a whole year that I was left just in the care of other devotees. And it was the care that I got from devotees like Mulika, who I don't know, she's still living in Alachua. I know that she might have. And the last time I saw her, she was in New York. Anyway, like Mulika, as I mentioned before, Ragatmika, Nanda, I see Vraja Govinda is there in Alachua. I saw that she said something there. She definitely cared for us, cared for Bhaktitirtha Maharaj whenever we would come to Alachua. Just devotees that have shown care makes such a difference in our lives, such a difference. Jayashree was in New York, and she was actually one of my peers. And Sunita and Toshan Prabhu, who cared so much. I mean, Sunita took me also under her arms. So I want to thank these devotees, Swarna, Vegavati, for sure, in Gita Nagari. They showed us just so much care. I mean, it's not that we don't have devotees that can show care. It's just that maybe we need to do that more, and we need more devotees to be showing this externally, this kind of care. And in that way, Bhaktitirtha Maharaj's prayer would have had some real meaning in terms of him leaving this world. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we have a program at 2:00, and so I believe that we now really we are grateful to all the devotees, and we could go on and on and on about Bhaktitirtha Maharaj and how he got that love from Srila Prabhupada. He got so much love from Srila Prabhupada personally, and how he was so committed. He was a loving person. Just a loving person, a caring person.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you so much.
His Holiness Srila Bhaktitirtha Swami Maharaj ki jai. His Divine the Grace Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gauri Premanandi. Hari Hari.